Welcome to Woah Drama Stories. We indulge of speaking of day-to-day troubles of human beings. Let's not wait any longer and start with the video. I, 34 female, met my loving husband, now deceased, when we were simply teenagers. We barely knew what love was. We barely knew anything about life, or anything really. We met in middle school when we had just turned 13. As it goes, I had a huge crush on him but never really got the chance to be open about it, until he finally held my hand and asked me to go get ice cream with him. Childish, I know, but that was one of the very best days of my life. We did start dating. It is in quotes because I was very childish and innocent. He lived just a few blocks away from my place, and my parents were aware of us being just friends. When we grew up a bit, meaning we both turned 16, it turned more into caring about each other, not only as friends, but as partners as well. Both our parents kind of suspected, but we did not hide anything from them, since we were both close to our family, and just came clean to both of our families. Something that I noticed was that my parents were not quite happy about it. Of course, at first, I thought maybe it was because their only child coming into her sexuality and exploring it, or maybe because they thought I am losing my innocence, and I will not be their little princess anymore. But that is not it. Every time I would bring up my boyfriend or invite him to a meal or go out to watch a movie with him, my parents did not say anything directly, but would give me very subtle hints that they were not happy with me spending time with him. Now, here's what bothered me. They would often say, it's just him. If it was someone else, someone smarter and more handsome, and met the standards, then we'd be fine with it. Meaning, it was him they were prejudiced against, and not me having a boyfriend. Why him? Why can't they be much nicer to him? I often questioned myself because when my parents would make snarky comments at his expense, and sometimes even in front of him, my heart broke every time because he was such a kind, loving, caring, thoughtful man, even during his teenage years. He never once misbehaved with me, never raised his voice at me, never disrespected, not once. Didn't he deserve all that too? Not only from me, but from my family as well? The more I grew up, the more they would try to set me up with someone else, knowing full well how happy I was with him and how happy he made me. They would try to set me up with their church friends' sons, their colleagues' sons, and even random good-looking men at Walmart and Costco. It became more and more annoying and more insulting, to be very honest. But I never felt this much rage and hatred towards them as much as I feel now. I would always forgive them and look past it because at the end of the day they were my parents and they gave birth to me and I am here because of them. I sympathized with that. The insults and the snarky comments only became more vocal. My husband was a gem of a person, one in a million if you will. He never complained about my parents. He always forgave them. He respected them no matter what and would always teach me to do the same. Even when my parents would leave snide comments about how my husband's biological father left him and is not in the picture anymore, turning that entire conversation and making it to be his fault. And even after then, he had nothing but good and respectful things to say about my parents. Now, this is something I would realize a lot later about how my parents would try to instigate fights between us. How can one do that? Being a parent, how can one just choose their ego every time over their child's happiness? But like the gentleman he was, he would always end up apologizing for the fights I would pick, or genuinely sit down and have a conversation with me about them. I'm crying again typing this out because he was the love of my life, and I will never have a love like that ever. But these are not sad tears. I'm happy that I got to spend a part of my life with him and he spent his entire with me. Having fallen in love so early, we did not waste any more time settling down with each other. We both got financially stable and moved in together into a rented house, where 3 months later he proposed to me. It was not extravagant at all. It was not in the hills, on the beach, but it was the proposal of my dreams. He made my favorite food and proposed to me with it. My parents tried everything in their power to talk me out of the wedding. They tried to have a conversation where they talked about every horrible, hypothetical situation that could happen to scare me into not marrying the love of my life. As of course, it fell on deaf ears, but it was not for the lack of trying. On my wedding day, I had asked my best friend to walk me down the aisle, since I knew being around my parents on that day will not make the day easier for me, which they of course knew about, that my best friend is going to walk me down the aisle. But on that day, they decided to make a big deal about it and shout and scream and call us disrespectful, and even blamed him for it, screaming, "I just know it was his idea. This is how he's trying to drive a wedge between us, for everyone to see." FYI, I stuck to the decision and my best friend walked me down. It was a beautiful ceremony except for the parts where my parents tried to make a scene. When the family picture of us was being taken, my parents, especially my mother, who was much more vocal about not liking him than my father, would not take a family picture with my husband because that would supposedly ruin it. We had 2 kids, twins. 3 years into the marriage, and my in-laws and my parents were both overjoyed with that news. And so were we. When we, the whole family, kids, husband, would come over to visit, my parents would still be the same insulting people, even though that this is the father of their grandchildren, which never quite sat right with me, because talking to a child that way is different from talking to your son-in-law. I didn't want my children to be affected by that, so I would never leave them unsupervised. Whenever my parents would be around my children, so would I. Now, talking about this is hard, but my husband took his own life around 6 months ago. He was struggling with his mental health, and he has been for years. He was in therapy and he tried. Trust me, he really tried. I'm not mad at him at all. I know he gave his all for as long as he could, and I have nothing in my heart except love for him. At his funeral, where his entire family, my in-laws are the most empathetic, affectionate, kind people that there are. They had even asked me to take a break from my job for a while to help me grieve, and said that they would support me and my children financially, emotionally, and however they can during that period of time, no matter how long it takes me to grieve. Weeks, months, years. At his funeral, where his entire family, our children, and everyone that ever loved and adored him was, my parents decided to make a comment. My name could have done so much better if we had known he was this weak. We would never have let our little girl marry him and ruin her life for him. I was too physically and mentally exhausted to react to it. My best friend tried to talk to them to take them to some other room, but they did not move an inch. Did I say something wrong? My best friend's name? You knew my girl since she was a child. You knew what she could have been, how happy she could have been if not for him. Do you not agree with me? My best friend looked at me, enraged, and did not want to engage, so she walked out of the room. I honestly did not disagree with her reaction. When my parents realized that no one is entertaining them, they walked up to my children and said, "Your father was weak. Be stronger than that, Bubba." That. You do not speak of my dead husband that way to his children. My children are 3 years old, and at that very impressionable age, and they thought that they could poison them against his father? No way. Not on my watch. I walked up and asked my sister-in-law to take the children to the backyard. This was it. This was my last straw. Grabbed my mother's arm and dragged her out of the house. Our house. The house where my husband and I lived and loved. Where he cooked me meals because food is my love language. Where he took care of his children. Where he always saw to it that we were happy and content, all while he was struggling. You do not disrespect him anymore. You do not get to belittle my husband in front of his children. I want my children to grow up knowing that their father loved him and cared for him. He was kind, caring, and loving among all the other good things he was. That was the last time I saw my parents. 6 months ago. They've tried calling me several times, visiting me, visiting my children, and calling my in-laws to no end. I've decided something for my children, and that is to not let them be around my parents anymore under any circumstances. I understand that if my husband was alive, he would not like our children growing up to be estranged from their grandparents. But I will not have my children grow up with a poor image of their father and who he was. I've come to ask you for help. Am I being cruel to my children? Am I doing something wrong trying to keep them away from their grandparents who love them? Should my parents' ego always come first? Because I know for a fact that they will not change their ways. They will not try to make themselves better or do better. They are very obnoxious like that. Should I not try to protect what legacy I have left of the love of my life? Should I not try to make my husband through with my children? Should they not know how much of a good person their father was? I do not want my children to grow up despising their father because of how he passed away. Tell me what to do. I'm in such a dilemma that is truly affecting my grieving process. Update 1. I feel so relieved reading your comments. So many of you genuinely understood why I could not leave or cut off my parents before all of this funeral mess. Thank you for understanding that I never for a second thought that parents could be that cruel. I thought maybe they knew what was best for me. But then being a parent myself, I realized it really is not that hard being kind to your child and prioritizing their happiness. So I gave my parents a call, and I would not say that they apologized. They never said the phrase "I'm sorry." They tried to beat around the bush, which I will not accept. They asked if they could come over, which of course I said no to, and settled to meet in a coffee shop where they expected to see my children, because they thought I would bring them, since there was not anyone else to babysit them. But as I said, I'm never putting my children in the same room as my parents. They were quite shocked to see I came alone, and looked past me to see my kids when they noticed that they were not with me. They threw a mild tantrum demanding to see them because they are blood related, and had that right and authority. You have no authority over my kids. You are not their legal guardian. I am not under your financial care, and neither are they. Everything goes through me. I am the only blood relation to them, besides my in-laws. You do not exist to my children anymore, not after trying to belittle their father in front of them in such an impressionable age. Their jaws remained dropped because they thought they could walk all over me this time as well. Not this time, not when it comes to my family. I asked them not to expect to see them anymore, and if they still wanted to keep a relationship with me after this, then I will visit them when I see convenient. They were almost crying and called me heartless and cruel several times to try to keep them away from their only grandchildren, and then threatened to even get a lawyer involved. To which I said, take any legal action you would like, and if you do not expect a relationship with me either. I will have my lawyer contact you. It had been 3 weeks since the coffee shop conversation, and I have talked to my mother-in-law and stepfather-in-law, and they have supported my decision, even agreeing to pay some of the lawyer fees. Where it hurts is that my parents-in-law apologized to me on behalf of my biological parents. They lost their son, and they are grieving as well. Plus, they have nothing to apologize to me for. But no, they stepped forward and apologized on behalf of my parents' cruelty, heartlessness, inhumanity, and callousness. I do feel blessed, even among all these, because it truly showed me people's real colors, which I had been blind to for years. I just wish I was this adamant about this decision when they bullied my husband for him just being himself and frankly no other reason. I cannot thank you enough for your support. I read each and everything all of you had to say, and your kind words did help me during these dark times. Update 2. Coming with another update, I hope this will be the last one of all. We had to get a lawyer involved because it was getting out of hand. My parents let everyone from my side of the family without any context that I tried to keep their grandkids away from them, because of which I had been getting numerous calls, emails, texts, and whatnot of people either asking me to explain the situation or just blaming me without knowing anything that had happened prior to that, or just calling me up to call me cruel and heartless. I spoke to a lawyer and got a restriction order for me and my kids against my parents, and then sent out a mass text to all my known family members, assuring them that they are not affected by my decision at all and can see my children any time that they want, with also informing them everything that was said by my parents and letting them know of their actions, which eventually minimized the phone calls and text. I'm so tired of my parents trying to put me through such an exhausting experience after I had just lost my husband. It's never my happiness and me that mattered to them. Currently, I'm looking for a job to move away from. This situation has become more and more toxic, and I hope to move near my in-laws. They live 3 states away, so that the kids can be looked after by trusted people when I'm working as such. It has good schools, great higher education, and mostly no influence of my parents. I truly hope that this is the last time I am ever typing an update regarding this. I don't want this situation to stretch out more than it already is. I cannot thank you all enough for wishing me a better life with my children, respecting our boundaries, and genuinely being interested in helping us out of this depressing experience. If not for you, I still would have been doubting my decision and sympathizing with my parents, only because of the fact that they gave birth to me, which in turn would have affected the kids the most, whereas my parents could be just oblivious to that fact. Thank you, everybody. Update 3. Thank you for checking up on me and my kids. Just came on here to let you know that we have been doing much better. I did move close to my in-laws and got an even better job. I talk about their father to them. I want them to remember. They are very curious about him and would often want to know how he was, and ask to hear stories about him. With tears in my eyes, I thank you once again for opening my eyes and helping me have a better life for myself.